Snipers, you have to see what's happening to the Bitcoin price this Thursday as we broke the $58,300 support level that we were watching, causing a candle low of 55,600 today. And our downside target right now is 49,700 because this is the only next support level where there's volume, and this is a 15% gap between 58,300 and 49,700. Indicating to me that we're gonna see a lot of volatility here with Bitcoin. If we can get back above 58,300, that would be an extremely bullish sign that we could continue into price discovery. But if we are not able to get towards 58,300, and especially with today's daily candle completely separated from the $58,300 level, we have to talk about what's happening right now in the micro timeframes to determine whether or not this is gonna continue to see downside. And if it does, realize this, I talk about this all the time on the Snipers channel, and there's a large range. We'll typically see some buyers come in at the midpoint of the range, right around that $54,000 to $55,000 level where Bitcoin is currently sitting and the 100-day moving average is sitting. And if we do see price action come down to this level and buyers in this area, what we're really going to be looking for is 6-hour volume, because that's the institutional time frame that allowed us to predict this downside move from 69,000, knowing the fact that we saw the most amount of volume come in at this $69,000 level, and it was to the sell side. That indicated that there were certainly more sellers coming in, and because we weren't able to hold 58,300, this is going to now turn into one of the most important resistance levels for Bitcoin in the short term. And of course, if we continue to see downside, we have to expect a lot of volatility, potentially towards the $54,000 to $55,000 level before seeing some sort of buyers come in. But the $49,700 level is on the table as long as we're below 58,300. So I want to just keep that very clear on this video. And when we go into the 1 hour time frame, because we can look at the micro time frames now that we're inside of this range to just kind of see how the volume is reacting. So far, every time we've seen large spikes of sell pressure, we have yet to see buyers equate to that sell pressure. And so that's going to be a big puzzle piece. Until we can start to see this change, we have to assume that there's potentially further downside for Bitcoin. Now, that doesn't mean this bull market's over. All this means is that there's a potential we could come and test 49,700 before seeing continued upside. So I do want to talk about what's happening to Ethereum, because we're seeing some strength with Ethereum today, but the Ethereum to Bitcoin chart has yet to form any higher highs. And that tells me that in the macro, we are still in a downtrend here for the Ethereum to Bitcoin chart. And a lot of times we'll see this chart become extremely volatile, but until we see a confirmation above this candle high that was at 72,600, we cannot assume that Ethereum is going to outperform Bitcoin or see less downside than Bitcoin, even though the Ethereum chart to the US dollar pairing is actually holding its 50-day moving average, unlike Bitcoin. And this is a huge puzzle piece for Ethereum. But notice how we stopped at 39.59, which was the extremely important support level that we had drawn out on our chart. And so until we start to see Bitcoin create some more decisive candles, and if we get above 58,300, we can start looking at more upside for Ethereum. But if we stay below 58,300, we have to assume that Ethereum is at some point or another going to see more downside than Bitcoin, unless the Ethereum to Bitcoin chart changes that storyline. And we also are watching the Bitcoin dominance chart because we know it's extremely correlated to the DXY. But the Bitcoin dominance chart, unlike the DXY, has yet to really see bullish strength. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And if we look at this chart, it's actually showing the opposite of the Ethereum to Bitcoin chart, which is a leading indicator for all of the other altcoins, with the Bitcoin chart forming continuous higher lows instead of lower highs. That says that there's strength here, that we at some point or another could potentially see a break to the upside, and that would confirm the fact that Bitcoin will see less downside than altcoins if we start to see continued price action to the downside. So the other aspect to all of this that I really want to address is the DXY. You can see that we're actually rejecting right now this extremely important resistance. If we continue to see downside here and we break this weekly open, that's going to be an extremely positive sign for Bitcoin. But even with this rejection thus far, this is actually a very positive puzzle piece for Bitcoin to not see more downside. So there's some positive things outside of Bitcoin right now that we have to look at, and the S&P 500 forming new all-time highs with the DXY rejecting that major resistance is also an extremely positive puzzle piece for the Bitcoin price. So even though we're seeing downside with Bitcoin, the outside environment doesn't look too bad. And that could indicate the fact that we could potentially come up and test 58,300 and maybe even get above it. Even if we get above it though, what we're still gonna watch is this monthly open at 61,300, because yesterday we talked about the 6-hour candle that was bullish, but we didn't get a confirmation above the weekly open at 61,300. And because of that, we saw continued downside. So 61,300 is still the most important range for the bullish confirmation of price discovery to continue for Bitcoin and to see new all-time highs. But until we can get above 58,300, that's off the table, and 49,700 is on the table as a potential downside target. And we have to assume altcoins are not going to perform as good as Bitcoin if we see downside. But if we start to see upside, that could certainly change the storyline. And we know there's always those isolated cases like Sandbox and AVAX seeing new all-time highs recently, and even the Crypto.com coin with the announcement of renaming the Staples Arena to Crypto.com Arena, seeing new all-time highs. There's always isolated cases, just like what happened in 2018 with Chainlink seeing new highs despite being in a bear market. That's always going to be on the table. But the chart that factors in altcoins outside of Ethereum is really what matters to the overall altcoin market, and that will typically follow the Ethereum to Bitcoin chart, which is why it's yet to form any higher highs, just like the Ethereum to Bitcoin chart. So we really want to monitor the Ethereum to Bitcoin chart. Even though we're seeing some upside today, that doesn't mean it's going to be the macro trend. The gold to Bitcoin chart has finally tested the 50-day moving average. And why is this a big deal? Well, remember on April 14th when Bitcoin initially topped out at the $64,000 level, we were watching this chart to see how much fuel Bitcoin had left. And as soon as we got above this 50-day moving average, by the way, this was the top for Bitcoin, we started to address the fact that if we were to hold this 50-day moving average, that could be a bad sign for Bitcoin. And then Bitcoin eventually at some point hit $28,000 with this chart rising back above its 100-day moving average, then rejecting its 200-day moving average. The question now is, with this 50-day moving average being tested again, is it going to reject like it did recently in September and continue to see further lows? If that's the case, Bitcoin has more fuel left. But if it doesn't and it gets back above the 50-day moving average and holds it like it did here on April 14th, then that could assume we have a double bottom and that Bitcoin potentially could have seen a short-term top and that this downside could be elongated further. The gold to Bitcoin chart has certainly been a great chart to watch, and we knew something was going to happen soon because we were coming up and we failed to form further lows recently. And of course, that has led to us testing this 50-day moving average. That's going to be a huge puzzle piece to watch here on the Snipers channel. Check out this chart that somebody on our Discord posted recently about where the moving averages are sitting for Bitcoin. Topansy, one of our great contributors in our Discord group, posted this. Thank you so much for being a contributor. We have the #1 cryptocurrency Discord group in the world. Notice here how the 200-day and 100-day moving average are sitting around that $48,000 level. And that's just below our extremely important support and target of 49,700. We have to realize the fact that at some point or another, assets love to come and test their daily moving average. And if we come and test this 200-day moving average, that would still put Bitcoin in a bullish trend, and it would be an extremely healthy correction for Bitcoin to eventually see new all-time highs. And now the floor is pretty much around that $48,000 level, as long as we can assume the fundamentals stay strong for Bitcoin, despite the economic factors being in the favor of Bitcoin, and we're still seeing downside. We have to realize that assets at some point or another will come and test their 200-day moving average. Thank you all for tuning into the Snipers channel today. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. I actually flew my father into Mexico today, so I'm a bit tired, but I'm always going to have my video out, as we always do here on the Snipers channel, and I'll see you guys the next time. Snipers.